I think we should be live. Hello, though. If you're already here, let me know. Also, I'll probably mention this again because I don't see anybody quite yet. I am not in my normal setup today because I'm hosting an event later at the office. So normally I'm in my streaming room with my microphone and stuff. So I hope the audio is okay. So if anybody else can already just let me know. If you can hear me, that'd be great. And I'm just going to send out a notification on Luma saying that we're live real quick. So bear with me for a second here. But if you're joining in already, say hello in the chat. Where you're watching from is always really fun. Also, if you want to include other details around like what you're building with RAG or why you're interested in RAG, that's also awesome. I'll just say we're live. And let me just link this. All right, people will probably be joining in here. I think we're like a minute early as well. So again, as you're joining in, feel free to say hello. And then again, if you can just confirm, looks like my audio is working, but like I said, I'm in a little bit of a different setup today. So just want to make sure that you can hear me or the audio isn't completely awful. Let me know. It shouldn't be, but I just want to double check. Just make sure. All right. Again, we'll wait probably a couple minutes before we really get going into the content here. And I'll probably share these links a couple times. So, oh, cool. Someone said sounds good. Thank you. I can actually bring up comments. I'll remove them if they get in the way. Someone else said they can hear me. Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'll probably share this out again later too. A lot of people just like staying in the chat and talking that way around the subject in the book. That's totally awesome. If you do actually want to come up on stream here, we've had some regulars in the past. I think they've been busy on Tuesdays now at this time, which is totally understandable. But if you do want to come up and actually talk in the stream and come on video or just audio discussion, you can message me on LinkedIn and I can send you an invite link to actually join the stream. Otherwise, you're welcome to just keep talking in the chat. I know that's where kind of most of the discussion happens. And then I try to bring in that conversation into the live format, whether it's like, showing the comment on the screen, reading out loud and bringing up those points of discussion. So feel free to keep talking in the chat. It's awesome. It's been way more lively discussion wise since we've moved to this format. So that's awesome. But if you do want to come up, again, just let me know. And I'll share some links. So this is the book that we're discussing today. And also, if anyone wants to put in the chat, did you actually read the book this time, skim it, anything like that, or did you take a look at it? Let me know. And there is an accompanying GitHub. So a lot of the tech books out there have, if they have a lot of code, like this one had a fair amount of code. They also have a GitHub. We can actually take a look at that live since we can't really share the book live, but we can discuss the chapters and contents. So if you're new here, you'll see what that looks like. And then I also made these slides shareable. So if you want to access these slides and view anything in here, like come back to any of the links, you can. And I usually, if there's anything interesting as we go, like stuff that people mention, I'll put notes in the very last slide. So if you have any awesome comments or recommendations for the topics discussed here, I'll put them in there. All right, so if you're new here to the AI Book Club, basically we read a new book every month and then we discuss online. There is a Slack group, Slack channel inside the Flight Slack group, which is Flight's open source AI orchestration tool that we maintain at Union. And there's just a channel in there called AI Reading Club. So if you want to discuss any of the book topics or things during the week, you can do so there, although most people just wait kind of for the discussion here, but that's available if you want to. I need to update this GitHub, but this is where I'm keeping track of, well, this is where I try to keep track of the books that we've been reading. I have the last several I need to add in there and the upcoming ones, which I'll talk about here in the slides in a second. And then, as always, the best place to kind of stay updated with what events are coming next is in the Luma calendar, but you might have found this on Meetup and stuff like that. Everything like gets posted to the Luma calendar is kind of the source of truth. And this is where we are for the year. So these are all the books we've read. if you've been here at the beginning. It's quite a bit. This has been actually maybe one of my favorite years so far. So we've done like, I think this will be the third full year. And book club kind of started during COVID where we did books slower. So there's a little bit more than that, but this has been a really, really fun year so far. And I see Kevin said hello. It was awesome to see you the other week, Kevin, in person too. Sorry, we didn't get to talk more. But this is the book for this month is RAG with Python Cookbook. And then next month is going to be build a reasoning model from scratch. And then September is vision language models. These two are posted. I will say this one, the date might have to adjust slightly. It is up already, but it's possible I might have to change it to the week prior because I might be traveling for work on the current week of. So just keep an eye out for that if you're excited about the vision language model one. And then as always, I want to know what book should we read next or what topics, and then we can go try to find books around those topics. So one thing that I've been wanting to do, because I've been doing a little bit more reinforcement learning for my work stuff, is go through one of the reinforcement learning books, maybe not the really dense Sutton one, but like there's Grokking reinforcement learning that looks really good and pretty condensed. And then there's some other good ones too. So I'm curious what other topics people want to learn about or what books specifically, if they have any they want to throw into the list, let me know now or let me know in the Slack channel that I shared. And while you're thinking about the next topics or books, I'm going to catch up on the chat a little bit. And Tim, it was awesome to see you the other night as well. It's cool. I've seen so many people in person now. And Tim said they skimmed it, was mostly interested in the graph RAG chapter, but also chunking. Yeah, because I know you were doing some cool RAG stuff. I believe we talked about in one of the streams before. And somebody said they read the first 3 chapters. What did you think of the first 3 chapters so far? For anyone who skimmed it or looked at the book, actually, what did you think? Again, what book should we read next? If you don't have any out the top of your heads, we can come back to this later as well. The format, I already said this, but in case you just joined, say hello, talk in the chat. You can message me on LinkedIn if you actually want to join the stream live here and have an actual audio discussion. And then I think the last thing before we really get into content is I always like to open up for other shout outs too. So we've had some really cool things where people just graduated in a certain area and people were looking to get hired, and at least they got the interview. So I don't know if they had got the job after that, but is anyone hiring? Is anyone looking for a job? Are there any other awesome projects that you just kind of want to shout out before we get going into the content here? One thing I'll shout out actually is I think there's still room to RSVP for this. Tonight, if you are in the Seattle area, technically this is in Bellevue, but we're hosting an event tonight as part of Seattle Tech Week. So with Quadrant, actually incredibly relevant for RAG. Quadrant or Quadrant, I think is maybe how you say it, is a vector database. Actually, I pull it up. This one. We're hosting an event with them tonight in the Union office. So if you are around Seattle, again, technically it's in Bellevue, but it's very close to the light rail station. So if you're in Seattle and you want to take the light rail over, you can do so. RSVP for the event. I think there's still room for it, but it's going to be with Quadrant, and I guess I should actually just pull up the event page, and 12 Labs, which 12 Labs does some really cool like multimodal video stuff, and kind of tonight's mostly talking around different memory things, so like Quadrant for a vector database for memory. So this is actually is actually going to be somewhat of a relevant event. I wasn't even thinking about that originally when I was going to share it. So I was like, oh yeah, it's actually a huge vector database though. And they have if you're looking for managed vector databases, unless they changed it, they had a really good free like developer tier. So I would go check them out if you're looking for one, like you don't want to host your own database and you want to just fiddle around and get started with a self-host or with a hosted one. They're a good one, or they used to be anyway. I haven't looked recently. Somebody said the code snippets were easy to understand. The O'Reilly GitHub link didn't have code for chapter 3, but it wasn't a deal breaker. Looking forward to getting into the end chapters. Oh, cool. Let me look real quick. So I shared this. Does it not have 3? It looks like there's at least a notebook in here. I haven't looked at all the code myself, but here's the link for what I think is chapter 3. in the code, which is the one I think you said that. Oh, invalid notebook. I see. I see what you're saying, I think. Something's up with this notebook. I wonder, before we get into the chapters, let me just see real quick. Can I open it in Colab? Or does it still give us an invalid link? Okay. It's opened up in Colab. If you want to go look at it there. I don't know why it won't work in GitHub. That's interesting, but it looks like you do want to look at the code or run the code here. It does work if you hit open in Colab. Let me just go back here. And again, for people who just joined in, this is the GitHub link, which we could go through some of the code if we want. All right, so I'm going to go through and I'll pull up the chapters and then we can kind of walk through the chapters. And again, if you want to join the stream, let me know on LinkedIn. I'll share my LinkedIn one more time. Where'd my LinkedIn go? Oh, I don't think I actually have it in here. I'll just pull up the link again. Did anyone have any favorite chapters or any chapters that they specifically thought sounded interesting? Oh, and the person said, cool. I think about the chapter was working in Colab. Yeah, I don't know what's up with the, it wasn't rendering or something in GitHub, I guess. So the chapters, this book wasn't incredibly long. Some of the books we've read this year have been really, really long, actually, like 800 pages. This was, I think, just under 400. So it felt like a much lighter read than some of the other ones. This had getting started with RAG, foundation models, loading data, data preparation, embeddings, vector databases and similarity searches, retrieval, agentic RAG, graph RAG, evaluating RAG systems, and RAG web apps. And I didn't run all the code through this, but I thought this was a really good introduction to RAG, like if you hadn't done RAG before. And I think in some of the chapters, like graph RAG and agentic RAG chapters, they do a good intro to it. They don't go, it's easy to want more from it, but I think they're good intro chapters. But I think, they're not a whole, it's not a whole book based on it. And this isn't like a massive book, like I was saying. So I think for the amount of pages this has and kind of what the book's trying to do, like give you these, it says practical recipes for data processing to LM agents. And they did a really good job of that. It was actually, I think, one of the better RAG books that we've read, because we read another one last year. It was a different, or was it earlier this year? It was, no, it was the same author, but they did a RAG book last year. I like this one better. I think it's a really good intro. Like I was saying, I think a lot of these topics you can go way deeper in, but these chapters do a good introduction to it. And same with like evaluating RAG systems, good intro, agentic RAG, graph RAGs. Those are the ones where we've actually played around with those. If you've been here for like the Friday AI engineering stream before, and that was really fun to poke around in. I think these were good intros, but you'd probably want to go deeper maybe if you're putting stuff in production. And there are whole books on like graph RAG, and I know one is coming out on agentic RAG if it's not already out. So I don't blame the author. It was very good. Just saying these ones you might leave you wanting a little bit more if you're expecting like a whole book on that topic. Let's see, catching up on chat real quick. Kevin said Pinecone, Milvus are some popular vector databases, but there's Postgres and extension to make vector DB. Yeah, this book talks about there's all the vector databases you've probably heard about. Like Chroma is a popular open source one. Like if you're just going to host it on your own computer, it's one that a lot of people get started with. Then you have Milvus. Milvus is actually also one that you can host yourself. Milvus is the open source, and Zillus is the parent company for that. They're like they do a hosted vector database. Milvus is their open source version. And then Pinecone. Pinecone, as far as I know, doesn't have like a self-hosted version. I could be wrong there, but they're a good hosted version. Qdrant, like I mentioned, is cool as well. Weaviate is also really good. They have a hosted version, but they also have like this open source lighter weight one that you can run on your computer. I really like when I'm playing around, at least like doing demos, getting started. Unless I know I'm going to be using the hosted one, it is nice to have like a pretty simple local version that I can get started and then use the same API basically to go to a hosted version. So I think that's like what Weaviate's kind of betting on with their open source, which is really cool. And somebody said they were really interested in chapter 9 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, I think these more kind of advanced ones. So if we've done, I don't know if everyone here has done, but if you've done any RAG before, these first chapters probably have a lot of stuff that you've already done or thought about. And then these later ones kind of bring up topics, at least these three, that maybe you haven't done yet, but you've heard about, like Agentic RAG and Graph RAG, and then evaluating RAG systems. So we'll dive deeper into these chapters that people want to. But it sounds like these are the ones that most people want to dive probably a little bit deeper into as well. And Tim said, oh, also interested in the Agentic chapter. Nice summer reading level. Yeah, it is. It's been nice outside. So I'm in Seattle, so it's been really nice outside. Haven't been reading quite as much on my computer, I guess. I've actually been reading more hard copy books that aren't necessarily like the tech books, which has been fun this summer. So actually, another good question is, what are people reading that maybe isn't even a tech book that you want to recommend for a non-AI book club? All right, so chapter 1, again, I'll bring up the chapters and then we can go through these sub pieces. And if there's chapters that have more interesting sub pieces, we can spend more time on them. So it sounds like the 8, 9, and 10 probably are, but I'll go through this real quick anyway. So again, chapter 1 was getting started with RAG. Starts with identifying high value RAG use cases for your organization, choosing the IDE. This is all just very basic kind of setup stuff, basically here. If you haven't done this before, it kind of gets you going. And you run like the first code example that they have. Chapter 2, also, if you've done stuff with LLMs, probably very basic here, talks about getting started with like a prompt template, connecting to various API keys, etc. You can also locally serve them with like Ollama. There's other different serving frameworks as well. And then creating structured outputs with Pydantic, which I actually thought this was nice. So they start you off by writing really good structured outputs from your LLMs with Pydantic, which actually is a nice touch here. Kevin was saying Ragus is, I'll bring it up actually. Ragus is evaluating framework to evaluate RAG. We actually did, I'll actually bring up Ragus so we can look at it later. Ragus framework. Oops, this is the right one. I'll share this out. Let me find I guess I can share the direct URL where their docs. Their docs has good stuff in it. This is the open source library. We actually did, again, if you've been here for one of the Friday AI engineering streams, we did a whole week on Ragus where, like, if you were following along, like you implemented this in a project, and it's a really cool framework with a lot of evaluation techniques. So kind of jumping ahead here to one of the other chapters, but just want to share it in the chat because it's actually a really cool thing. I think if you're interested in the evaluation piece, they have a lot of really good pre-built metrics, but also in their docs, which I can get the link later. I didn't see it there. They break down like how they do it. So if you're just interested in seeing like some of the metrics there, like LM as a judge or faithfulness, different metrics that are built in, they're a really cool framework for it. And during so like if you haven't been on not every Friday, but a lot of Fridays, I host something called like AI Build and Learn, where we choose a topic or a tool and then actually try to implement that thing throughout the week. And we did one on Ragus, and that's what I was saying. I forget if Kevin was there, but quite a few people come to both the book club and to that. So if you were there, that was really cool. And then I'm actually doing one this Friday on using open source text to speech models. So if that's interesting too, you can join that and then try to potentially build a project between now and then you can come on stream and like show off your project and talk about what you learned there. And we're doing that with open source models, or I'm doing the open source models. But if you want to do a different commercial model, you're welcome to bring it, and then we can compare it. So then chapter 3 talked about loading data, loading Word files in Python. You might have done that before. Loading PDF files, tabular files, structured data from different types of databases, audio files. And then it talks about how you can maybe get like speech to text models to extract text from audio files, and then same with extracting words from images or PDFs with OCR. They use a Tesseract here, which was, or I don't know if it still is, a really good, a really popular OCR model. But now I think a lot of people are using like VLMs for OCR. And then they talk about that in the next section here, using multimodals. Multimodal models. There's also probably, since this book came out, because usually it's like months or a year before, like when someone's writing the book before it gets published, there's been actually a lot of recent, really good looking OCR models that have come out. So if you're looking to do OCR, which is object character recognition, so you're bringing in the characters from something like a PDF or handwritten notes, there's been a lot of LM OCR models that have come out that have really good benchmarks. I haven't used them yet in something, but they look great. Generating text descriptions for images via multimodal. So if you're embedding things that isn't just text, which I guess maybe we glossed over it, but can you start with RAG? So it talks about RAG a little bit. Does everyone know what RAG is here? I'm guessing that a lot of people have an idea. But if you don't, right, you're basically usually using an LM, like you're doing a query to an LM, and then based on that query, there's different ways to bring in the context, and that's what this book does. But you can bring in extra context based on that query from like another database. So often you have a vector database, you give it a query, and you say, tell me about the subject, and it's going to find chunks of text that represent knowledge of that subject inside of database, bring that knowledge back to the LLM. So then it gets your query with that kind of new knowledge, and then it's going to generate a response based on the query and that knowledge. So the idea is hopefully it's going to be a better grounded response versus just making generate something without kind of the extra context. And sometimes you need this because if your LM was not trained on your data at all and you have very specific things, or if you're trying to ask it questions about something that happened after the LM training cutoff date, it just doesn't have that context at all in its memory, or has outdated context. So basically RAG just allows you to bring relevant information in, and there's different ways of architecting and loading in that data. And that's what this book kind of talks about, basically. But I assume I maybe made the bad assumption that a lot of people already knew what RAG was here. But you can also do that with things like images and videos, not just text. So they talk about embedding images. So when you embed an image in a vector database, unless you're looking at raw pixel values, which usually isn't helpful, you actually want to have basically text tagging so it can load in the right text, the right images there. And then chapter 4 talks about data preparation. You can add metadata as well. So when you're searching for the proper information to bring in, you actually might want to search by metadata or something too. That could be like, date and time or where something came from. That can enable like some really powerful metadata filtering practices. So if you're doing stuff, again, like the date or something like that, and you only want to filter on that, you can do that. Or if you have specific topics for, I'm kind of making this up, but like if you're doing like a lawyer chatbot type of thing, or help, like a prep help thing for lawyers, metadata could probably really be powerful, like what cases are from and like tags and stuff like that in there, and then only look for cases under that type of metadata that you want to, instead of like the entire library that you have in there. So it can filter something down and make sure you're getting closer to the right information that you're going to be bringing in. Enhancing data quality by replacing abbreviations and technical terms. So a lot of times you'll do some sort of pre-processing to the text that you're embedding, so that you can make sure you retrieve it better. So even if you're retrieving, if you are doing the chunking piece, you can also just do this there's different ways of you can have a child node that it queries and then it brings in the full text that isn't pre-processed. But I think a lot of times you're just doing pre-processing, like you're replacing those abbreviations and technical terms, or you might be removing things like punctuation sometimes in certain areas I've seen has different results, because if you're basically having some way of bringing this context in, replacing certain terms and stuff like that you think people would actually be querying for, can help bring in the right context. It can improving search accuracy by creating hypothetical questions for chunks. This is kind of interesting too. It's almost like you're doing synthetic data for what you think people might be asking for. And then you can create chunks for that. Even again, there's different ways of how you can have these chunks come in and then refer to like just the parent text or something like that without actually bringing that chunk in. And that can be really interesting, one for testing, but also actually having pre-populated things where you think people are going to be asking a question, you want this chunk to come in. So a lot of really cool, interesting stuff you can do around the data preparation to make RAG perform better for your case. Splitting documents via character splitting. Again, how do you split things up? This is always like basically chunking and stuff like that. It's like a hyperparameter for your RAG systems, just like other ML models, where it's like, how do you do the chunking? How much overlap is happening? Like how big are the chunks? They talk about different ways to do that. It really just depends on what type of RAG systems you're doing. But for example, like I built a chatbot that was doing RAG with like documentation before, and I had pretty like they were super small chunks, but I had like typical size of chunks for the docs. So let's say they're like 400 tokens or something like that, and it gets brought in. But if you don't chunk the documents right, then it loses a lot of information. So like, for example, if you're doing docs for tech stuff and it cuts off like a Python function, like you don't want to do that probably. You probably want to have the entire code thing get returned back in that chunk. So how do you think about that? And then a lot of times the doc pages were actually fine. If I knew that was actually relevant, I would actually just want to return like the entire doc contents to the chatbot. And so you could use, again, you have this little chunk come in, it says like this looks relevant, or maybe you get multiple chunks from that page and you can kind of say, oh, if there's more than one chunk, then that whole page is probably relevant. Let's just throw that into the chatbot. And stuff like that has worked really good for like technical documentations from some of the historical stuff that I've done. You can also use LLMs to help doing it. So like splitting text with agentic chunkers. And I think honestly, a lot of people probably do something like this now, because why not give it to an LLM and get potential better chunks back. Let me just make sure. Kevin might join the stream. Again, if you want to join the stream here and come up in the conversation, message me on LinkedIn. I'll share the link again one more time. Just sharing the stream link with someone real quick if you want to join. Also, if you just want to stay connected and see the other events that we're doing and stuff like that, you can also find me on LinkedIn. We catch up on chat while I think Kevin's joining. Kevin said they did a multimodal project for their Carnegie research last semester. Awesome. Somebody asked, what are some RAG industry use cases that people have seen in their companies? I mean, anything that you need to bring context into for better answers, or another big thing is that also people forget for citing things. So if you're doing stuff and it's really critical that you go double check that it's correct. RAG is also really cool because it can bring in that context, but it can also say where it got that context from, like literally in the chat, and then link you back out to the PDF or the docs or something like that. And I think that's really powerful too. But I mean, the industry use cases are kind of everywhere that I can think of. Like again, talking about lawyer stuff, medical stuff, even just chatbots for talking about documentations or code generation, bringing any type of context in. You can even have things where you only have context that gets retrieved for that day, and you start populating with things that happen during that day or things that need to be done that day specifically, and again, pull that in. I don't know if you have any other kind of deeper dive use cases you're looking for, or anyone else have other use cases they want to throw out there. Somebody said, could I ask a question about the data preparation part? What is better method to split text into chunks? I think that of course, just like most answers in the machine learning field, is that it depends on what your data looks like. So that's why they kind of talk about all these different ways in here. And now, like I was saying, you can even do the agentic chunking is probably going to be, or can be good. If you're using Claude and asking like, well, look at this data, at least some of it, and maybe help me write a chunking apparatus. So again, this is just how your data is split up. And like I was saying, if you're doing technical documentation, you want to think about keeping like whole code snippets together and stuff like that. So it depends on the type of data that you're doing. I don't think there's a golden answer for something that's going to work for every type of data. So if you have an example, the person asked that, Ewan, of like what type of data you're thinking about, but it really is going to depend. And as always, just like with other machine learning stuff, it might depend, but then you should also test it. So there's like the evaluation chapter. If you want to make sure that it's returning good chunks, of course, you can start with eyeballing it like a lot of people do, but then there's actually other metrics and observability stuff you can put in, which you should totally do if you're doing something in production. Chapter 5 is embeddings, mapping the linguistic meaning of text chunks to numerical representation. Let's see, Kevin's here. Welcome up, Kevin.
Hi, Sis. Thank you.
Yeah, great to see you again.
Likewise.
Sorry we didn't get to talk more in person the other week. It was really cool to see you in person, though.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Did you have anything specific you want to add in?
I think somebody's asking, right, what are the use cases? Also use cases, and also you were saying, especially masking, right? So use cases, actually, I can give an example. I did work in Ontario, Toronto, for a nuclear power plant. It's a government, semi-government. So obviously, some of the documentation is not available in the market, right? So you have to feed in the domain specific, and that's not necessarily for the power plant, but even for the banks when I used to work before. For example, in states, right? Let's say you have I don't know, Bank of America, they have interest rates different, but in Canada, they have interest rates different, right? So how do you basically customize your LLM with a domain specific to that bank, for example? So that's one use case where you feed the documentation specific to your domain case to the RAG. And also, like you mentioned, sometimes I think a year ago, if you ask who is the American president, sometimes it gives you Joe Biden, not the current president. So obviously, these LLMs are very expensive to train, pre-training, right? That's what they call. So you cannot train regularly as much as you would like to them. That's one. And third, also, hallucination, right? Sometimes, LLMs are like my daughter, very confidently say wrong things, So you want to make sure, if not eliminate, to mitigate the hallucination of these LLMs. How do you achieve that? By feeding the actual information so that LLMs get the process, right? Retrieval and generation. So you augment, first you retrieve the information from the vector database with the cosine similarity or whatnot, and then you augment with the generation, the LLM response. That's how basically you can reduce the hallucination, other stuff, That's just want to add to that.
Yep. And not just your daughter, I would say just a human of almost any age can confidently say something wrong, I think. Yeah, I feel like there's so many use cases, just anything for bringing in context. And that could be, like you were saying, search results, just regrounding whatever the task is even. Obviously, like Google AI does this, right? Like if you Google search something, and at least theoretically, it answers stuff, and then it should be bringing in the results that also get returned, although they've gotten way better at it. But I actually remember a funny example, which was like I Googled something, like I think I was asking, do any of the previous Daft Punk members have like solo projects or something? And the AI very confidently was like, no, they have none. And then the top Google research was saying, the top Google search result said, yes, here's the thing. And I just thought it was funny because they have the search results, they just weren't using it actually as context in the AI. So I think they've gotten better at it, but it's definitely not perfect.
And also I want to add one more. So why would use a RAG, right? Before, like somebody who is not familiar out there. You can also use fine tuning, right? You can actually, in the prompt, you can give the information. Like, for example, you can, in the prompt, you can specify, like, let's say about me, right? If I'm trying to customize my LLM to my information, I can feed, okay, this is Kevin and so, maybe 3-4 lines. But if I have to feed my whole resume, which is like 5 pages, for example, obviously fine-tuning through prompt engineering is not enough, right? You have a lot of documentation. So that's when you would go a use case where RAG, your documentation more than 3 or 4 lines. That's a good use case of why would you choose, RAG.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it actually too, is like if you haven't done RAG yet, but you've probably done prompting, but at some point your prompt gets too big and you don't have enough information. A RAG is just bringing in the relevant information based on a query. But really it is just the prompt. It's just how does that information get in, and you use RAG, the retrieval part, to bring in the correct stuff, and then you augment the prompt with it, and then it generates the results on it, which is what RAG stands for, is retrieval-augmented generation, in case we didn't say that already too.
And also I want to add one more. So why would use a RAG, right? Before, like somebody who is not familiar out there. You can actually, the prompt,
Yeah, the embedding chapter talks about embeddings. This is the numerical representation that text gets turned into. So like in a vector database, when you embed chunks or words or tokens, basically they get a relation kind of mapped to them with embeddings. So like the common example people always like to use is like, a king minus woman, or a king minus man plus woman, or something like that, and that equals queen. Inside the embedding space, theoretically, those things are going to be close together, so you can see that they're related. So if you did like a nearest neighbor search kind of to them, you'd see that these things are related, and the embedding does that. It builds out this map of relations to things that are going to be close to it. So then when you have a query come in, you can look at those close things and then maybe grab those chunks and then bring those results in. And you can also do this for images, like talked about clip, which is, what does that stand for? Contrastive something, image, something, I forget.
I forgot, actually. That's more of a multimodal, actually. I think that's the first multimodal out there where it uses both text as well as images. Yeah, I think you're right. I forgot that.
I need RAG in my brain to tell me what clip stands for, but basically this was trained on images with text pairs. And then so it can do embedding on images and actually return text pairs on it. And it's still used and stuff, but it was the first one, like Kevin was saying, that kind of changed the game for doing things like image embedding. So it's a cool algorithm. And chapter 6 was vector databases and similarity search. So then it starts talking more about different databases that you can start storing those embeddings in, and then use that to retrieve the results from, like we were talking about. And we already mentioned several in the chat, but just to reiterate them, there's a whole bunch of different ones you can use. They start out with FAIS, which is Facebook AI's, I forget what this stands for too, but it's Facebook's vector database that kind of lives in memory as far as I know. I've only ever used it in like a notebook previously to test stuff. You might be able to save and reload it. But then when you actually want to store and work with your embeddings in a vector database, you can actually save. A common one people use is Chroma, which is an open source, very lightweight one. I do recommend if you're just getting started, you want to run this in a notebook or locally, but you can actually have a little bit of a vector database save. Chroma is a good one to get started with. Then they also talk about storing embeddings in Postgres. And just like Kevin, I think it was you that mentioned earlier in the chat, Postgres and almost every major database now has some sort of like plugin or something that can turn kind of this regular database into now a vector database, so it can easily search in that vector space, in that embedding space, and get chunks returned back into it. So if you're looking, like, I think SQLite probably has one now too. I forget. I think most of them do. MongoDB definitely does. So a lot of ones that we didn't mention or that aren't mentioned in the book, there's just a ton that you can choose from. And it just depends on use case and maybe what your company's already using of what you want to use. But we'd also mention Pinecone, Weaviate, Qdrant, Milvis, Zillus. I'm sure there's some other ones, but there's a ton of them that you can Google different vector databases.
I want to talk about this one point up on this slide. So in a large enterprise, right? So most of the enterprises, they have some kind of RDBMS, Postgres, or whatever, MySQL. So the option, right? Sometimes if you want to buy another vector database, open source or not, versus you're already using some dot. Let's say, for example, Postgres you're already using, you can just have a plugin which is extension PG vector, so you can make it a vector database. That's one advantage. I'm not suggesting either. I don't work for any of those databases, but that's one option where you don't need to invest or buy open source. Use open source or commercial one, but you can make your own current RDBMS as a vector DB. That's an option. I think people also take that route, so that I don't know, easier to adopt vector database and have the RAG.
Yep. Yeah. They make it really easy. Also, a lot of vector databases, hosted ones like Weaviate, for example, and Qdrant, I think, Pinecone. I don't know all their features, but a lot of them have other cool built-in features like for chunking the data and saving the data as like a pre-processing step. So yeah, there's more than just hosting the database. They usually have some other cool things, and caching actually too. So if you're getting the same query pretty often, or I'm sure there's settings for this, but basically if you're getting the same query into the vector database, instead of actually searching it, it can actually just save that result. So you could have like a similarity on query and the results that get returned. So if you need results returned even faster, you can basically have these like cached query and return pairs. So there's a lot of other stuff if you're putting this in production that you can like think about, and those hosted ones often have those cool kind of like enterprise features.
Right. Recently, I did one of the RAG. I built a chatbot for one company. Actually, it's a Frontier Lab. I'm not at liberty to share it, but I built a chatbot. But also, I had to make some API calls. And one of the asks is make it caching, so that one, if the user asks the same question, but not necessarily, right? Sometimes you don't want to, send to the LLM, because if you're using a commercial LLM, it's expensive, make multiple calls. So in that case, actually, I use a Redis. Redis can be used as a caching. So I did use a Redis. It's more of like a hash key. There are multiple ways you can use Redis as a cache. So one of the simpler way is you can just as like a hash key. I think more like a key value. And in that scenario, I did happen to use Redis as a caching mechanism, so that the prompt and result can be as a cache, so that need not go to the LLM for every same call.
Yeah, and in this case, you cache basically the entire generated response, right? Not just the retrieval piece, but the actual generation.
Yes, I meant the whole generative. When I said retrieval, I meant
No, I was just making sure and clarifying, because I was like, that's even cooler, right? Because then that's even less expensive. Like you're saying, you're not even paying for the LM call, and you're not paying for the vector search. You're not paying for any of it. It's
That's
just
more
getting
useful,
returned.
right? Because you want, at the end of the day, LLM is more expensive than the vector database. Vector database, who cares, right? LLM is more tokens or whatnot, Especially you cannot control employees, right? Like in my case, when I work with the on-the report generation, you have a lot of employees using this documentation, like, it's retrieval searching. You cannot control, like, you could control, but you wanted to have some restriction, so that, not restriction, more of a design implementation, so that caching is obviously better for the token, optimization.
And did you cache if it was only the direct exact same query, or did you have like a similarity threshold?
Right now, I think just same query, like whatever let's say, for example, what is the capital of I don't know, Canada? Then that's the prompt. But you're right. Similar, probably that's probably next version. I didn't get the chance, but
no, I wasn't. I was just saying that's another way of doing it, and it might not even be the best way. Like if you want a more correct answer, maybe you don't want to cache that and just have the exact same thing. But just talking about the different ways that you can cache stuff and make it more efficient in production.
You're right. And
it's not always the best way.
Yeah, thinking out loud here, you can also do tokens, right? It's not the whole prompt, rather tokens. Maybe then it becomes a similar query. Tokens are same, then probably same key, get the response. Yeah, that's a possibility.
Somebody asked a question on too. When you cache an LM response, do you use only that for that user or anyone in the org? I assume anyone.
That's a great question, actually. It depends on the accessibility, right? So when you're using, let's say I log in as myself, Kevin, and obviously myself, I think that's a great question. So we have to design such a way that, there's no access issue. So yeah, I mean, short answer, I don't know the answer, but when you design, actually, that's how you should be designing, not just specific to the user, for the whole organization.
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing. So I don't know what your use case was, but if it was like a public chatbot and it was only accessing public documentation or something, you could just probably cache that result if you think it's going to be good for everyone. But if you're using like RAG to pull in other context around the user, or whether they're logged in so you can see their account history or something like that. Like if this is a hypothetical support chatbot and they have an account with my company or something like that, and you can have like a log of stuff, then you probably wouldn't cache that, because you want to pull in, like if you're pulling in data specific to that user, you wouldn't cache it. But
I think you're asking more, let's say, for example, right, I'm retrieving a HR document. For example, I have a chatbot. I'm a new employee. I'm trying to find out what is the, I don't know, PTO policy, vacation policy. That's probably generic to everybody. But example, let's come up with an example where you have to make a call to the LLM, right? Obviously, PTO policy, you don't need to make a call. For example, in Canada, for example, what is the Ontario government policy? I don't know, for some reason, if you want to take a sick day, right? For example, that's probably you have to make LLM call, not necessarily your organization. That could be very generic across the organization. So in that scenario, I would make it, I would design such a way that, when you cache it, not just for that user, across the company. That's how we should be designed.
Yeah, or you could cache per country, like depending on the question. So it's like you cache per country, like if you have different vacation policies in different countries or something like that, and
right.
When you get a query from it. So yeah, it's just I guess it would just be a design decision based on what is being answered and if there's any dynamic stuff that you need. I guess also to thinking about it is like if you cache an answer and then that changes in 3 months, you want to uncache that. So like, is there going to be like refreshing or freshness that you need in there as well?
Yeah. Yep.
Just
That's
another
how the caching should work, validation.
Yeah.
You have to validate.
Yep. Just another design decision on it. Let's see, real quick retrieval. We got like 15 more minutes. I could probably go a little bit over today. Optimizing query results via metadata. So we talked about metadata in one of the other ones, and I think in the loading one. So this is about retrieving it, but again, using different methods of retrieving the metadata. And then enhancing retrieval accuracy with hide. I forget what hide stands for. I actually wrote it down. Let me see if I can find that real quick. I'm figuring out how to best take notes because I've been like, I usually put stuff in the slides here, then I've been using Obsidian for my personal notes. So I have like kind of both going on right now. But hide is hypothetical document embedding. So this is kind of if you want to improve search results by creating pseudo documents that match the style of real content in your database. So you could create, you generate basically hypothetical documents that match what you think. This is similar to one of the other builds we were talking about. We match what you think the user's query is going to be. And then you can use those hypothetical documents to improve maybe the search piece. But then again, depending on how you architect it, you might not, you actually pull in that data. That's just for the search piece of it, like the similarity search or embedding search or vector search. And then you would pull in like the actual parent chunk that's kind of referencing to. Let's see, addressing complex requests by designing a query routing system. I think they have a diagram in here. Again, I won't show the book, but I wonder if it's in the GitHub actually. But basically just having a router like any other, like if you've done agents before, there you can have different LLM routing systems or some sort of routing system that can actually, you can pull in from different vector databases or even automatically narrow something down. You could also have, I don't think it's part of the routing piece here. I think it's this one of these ones, or maybe it's in the agentic one actually, section of the next chapter. You can also have an LLM rewrite the query. So if you give it a little bit of knowledge, like in the prompt of how to query things, it can get a user query and then kind of reword those things. And then the agent pieces also can reword it multiple times. So like you can have it do vector search, get results and say, ooh, this actually isn't really good. Let me try again or several times until I think I get the knowledge that I need in there. So a lot of different ways to kind of improve the retrieval piece. A lot of it happens from the data embedding piece, like we've already talked about, but there's different ways of like, how do you route or kind of auto merge things together.
Actually, for the routing system, we talked about last time when we talked about a book, right? The agentic patterns. One of the patterns was actually router. If you remember the conversation, we did discuss about the same pattern router. So I think that's what they're using here. I think that router pattern,
Yeah, I was going to look real quick in the book. I won't share the screen with it, but I was going to see, because I mean, router is just choosing a different LLM or a specific agent for it. But for this specific one, I wanted to see again, because I think they had like a graphic and I can just describe it. Yeah, I guess, yeah, you want to handle a complex user question by directing them to the right data source. So just like I was saying, it could be different data sources as their use case. So you could have different vector databases for different things. You could have different specific agents or even LLMs with different prompts in it. It's really up to you, I guess, to define what they're routing to. But it takes that query, and then you can have different systems that you think are going to do better results for different things. Like if you're doing customer support versus item return or something like that, right? And you automatically go to the right place.
Yeah, that's interesting design actually. I don't know if I mean it's probably theory. I don't know. We have to see if it's possible, but if it is possible, it's really right because in a large enterprise you have multiple subsystems. The databases they call
Yep.
EIS, Enterprise Information System. Sometimes you have an Oracle, you have MySQL, SQL Server. Actually, for example, customer information in one databases. Sometimes vendors or partners, different databases.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's possible that actually it's a great design architecture. You could actually based on the query you can actually reroute to these different subsystems and get the retrieval information and augment with the LLM generation.
Yeah, and even back to the other part of design from as if it was a customer or something too, right? Like you could have routing based on country or something like that. Like, hey, here this is going to be a separate vector database with all this country's policy for vacation, sick time, or whatever. Maybe it's not even stored in the same vector database. And then you have a specific one based on the user coming in, right? Or what type of customer are they in your company or something like that. Like
Right.
you could have.
Actually, I can give more relevant example, which we all can relate. Tariffs, right? So obviously, tariffs are EMA, European, as well as Asia, as well as CAFTA, NAFTA. The tariffs are very different based on these
Right.
regions. So definitely, you
They're
have
changing.
to.
They're changing all the time. So you definitely need like a RAG database to come in, right?
You bet. Actually, the previous one we also talked about. We didn't talk about the re-ranking. That's very critical. The re-ranking when you get the query results, you can actually re-rank based on the like. That's actually very relevant. Sometimes the results come from the vector databases is not what you would like to be ranked. So you can also re-rank. I think that's a
Yep.
great augmentation. To the process.
Yep. And you can do that kind of with the agentic piece in some way too, like where you can evaluate and then re-optimize prompts too. But I guess it's a little bit more overhead with an LM, I think.
Right.
Yeah, the Agentic RAG design a custom tool in Python. So it just kind of shows you how to build an agent if you haven't done that before in Python. And then using the workflow patterns in multi-agent systems. So they talk about prompt chaining, which is what it sounds like, where you can chain multiple prompts together. Routing, which we've already talked about. So again, it kind of brings up some of the stuff, but in the agentic context. So the routing, I guess before, I don't know if it, maybe it's not an agent if it's not using an LM. You do if statement routing, saying what country they're in or something like that. And here you use the LM to auto route where to go. But again, it could be different data sources or a different path that goes down. A parallel task, so that you could be running multiple agents at the same time in parallel, doing different data processing. So maybe you have a ton of data. Actually, maybe you want to pull in, like, I'm making this up because I don't think they use this in the example in the book, but you could have like actually different prompts for different agents to go find the information. It would be more expensive because you're paying like 3 agents to do this instead of 1, but maybe they go find things a little bit differently and then augment the results together at the end, and maybe you'll get a better result that way. Orchestrator workers, I forget how they define this one. I assume, I think you're orchestrating different worker agents to do a task, but I forget what their kind of specific example was for this
flight,
one.
it's more of an orchestrator. So I'm assuming similar to what you guys do at the flight, orchestration.
Yeah, but I mean, I get it. Like, but parallel kind of does that too, right? Like, I guess parallel without orchestration is less dynamic, maybe. I guess, and the orchestration piece is more dynamic potentially. See, this is 8.2. I'm just gonna see real quick what they say. This is orchestrator workers. Uses an agent that acts as a coordinator. The orchestrator has access to multiple worker agents, each specialized in a particular task or domain. Yeah, so I guess kind of what, like I was saying, parallel one, you could have different prompts on them and stuff too, but this isn't parallel. This is just a specific one. So like if you had multiple databases, is I guess a good example here is, and you have a vacation agent that knows all the vacation policies or something, right? And someone's asking about it, it's going to call that specific agent, like vacation agent worker, and then it's going to know how to pull that information correctly. And maybe it has the different routing because not all the other ones need routing or something like that. So you just break down your problems. Like when I've done multi-agent stuff before, I always like having, I like multi-agents a lot because it's easy to break down prompts and have an agent usually do better results on one specific thing, and then have another agent call it. And that's worked really good. So I guess that's just doing that, but with RAG. And then evaluator optimizer. I assume, like I was saying, that the example there is just you have someone evaluating what's returned or the query that's generated and then optimizing it. I forget their exact example here too. One LM creates an initial draft and another LM reviews it and then optimizes it. So just like I've done with document writing or anything like that, you have a draft and then optimize it. And I guess that's also on the generation piece. But you can also do like I don't think it was explicitly mentioned here. Maybe it is in the evaluator optimizer piece and I just forgot, but you can also do this just like we were saying with the re-ranking. So like it can actually pull in the chunks, and before the generation piece, it can actually just look at those chunks returned, say if they're good enough or not for the query, and then re-query it if needed be. And Tim said they were using agent skills a few weeks ago to do some kind of light routing. Not sure how well it will scale yet. Is it like skills as in just like a markdown file, like with prompt on it? Which I mean, can work really good depending on the use case for routing. From what I've seen, you can use different sizes of LM. Like there's some use cases where I've been working with some people. And they want to use, smaller, like a pretty small self-hosted LM to do the routing piece that then goes to like a more expensive LM after. So you can self-host like a pretty small thing. Actually, I forget if it was you, Kevin, or someone else in a different chat, but we were talking about this a couple Friday streams ago. Actually, maybe it was at the Agent Book Club last time too. And there's a paper where I think it was a chatbot at Amazon uses a BERT model to do the routing, because you can train a BERT model, which is the bidirectional encoder representation transformer. We got one. We remembered one. You can use that, and it does a really good job of doing like classification or sentiment based on unstructured data like text. And so you can actually, if you know that your router only needs, let's say, like 5 routes, and you actually have a good amount of data for it, you could actually fine tune a BERT model on that sentiment or keywords, like whatever is looking for, and then route to the correct place. So I don't know. I think BERT models would be interesting when people get more data, or as people collect more data, for like fine tuning a router.
I actually used it. I think I spoke about last time. I did use it. The BERT model. They have deBERT, Alberta. There are quite a few flavors of the BERT. I use deBERT. It's actually a bi-encoder, cross encoder. The one I use is deBERT V2, which is a cross encoder. I did a project for the Carnegie as part of my research.
Cool.
So one of them actually, I think I spoke about last time. So in the stage 1, I was using the deBERT model to re-rank, to actually filter what they call prune. So it's basically, I think it's running short of time, but basically it prunes all the DOM elements. Then it'll feed to the next stage. In the second stage, it uses the LLM. We don't want to feed all the DOM elements because it's expensive, right? So it's called term is pruning, means it'll filters out all the DOM elements to like a top 50 or top 100, and then feed to the LLM so that you can reduce the token, cost.
Oh yeah. That's really cool. I guess trying to cram in the last few chapters here in the next several minutes. Graph RAG. We did, like, I don't expect everyone to have been here on a previous Friday stream, but we actually did a engineering stream several weeks ago, on maybe like more than a month ago now, on using Neo4j, the graph database that's used in the book. It's kind of the most popular one. We're doing graph RAG. So it allows you to build this knowledge graph of all these different connected topics and stuff like that together. And then for RAG, it's pretty cool because you can have a query come in like that. And oftentimes you're going to combine regular vector search and then a graph RAG on the back end, from what I've seen. And talking to people at like Neo4j, this is a pretty common pattern for RAG, is you use like vector search, you return those chunks, but then with those chunks, you get the relationship to other documents. So it's kind of cool. You can get something return, and you can traverse this kind of graph that goes to other relevant topics or documents. So again, going back to like a lawyer example, you want to find relevant cases or something like that. Basically, you get something queried in, the relevant chunks come in, and then you get a graph to all these other things that might be relevant, and you can traverse them. And that could be like bringing in that knowledge or just having references to them. And you can usually say like how much depth you want to go to like bring in that knowledge. So a cool way of bringing in just more knowledge if you have like a graph representation into RAG, which seems really, really interesting for some use cases, I think, for sure.
Yeah, like Facebook or Meta, right? The friends, right? You want to know friends, right? That's the
Yeah.
best use case graph RAG, I guess.
And then we had evaluating RAG systems, which I think is the last really interesting chapter. The last chapter, which I'll go back to the other one in a second, this just kind of shows building an app with like Streamlit, which is fun if you kind of want to get something deployed. But chapter 10 is evaluating RAG systems, choosing the right evaluation metrics for RAG, evaluating RAG systems by humans, which is what we pretty much always start with, I feel like, and then creating synthetic data for automated testing. So you can create synthetic data. And we looked at some of their tools on the AI engineering streams, like Rise Phoenix, MLflow. They all have these like synthetic data set creation pieces now that you can create synthetic data and then rerun, like when you do changes to your RAG system or LLM, you can kind of run with that synthetic data and see what gets returned there. So really good to have some sort of data set for you to test on. Evaluating the retriever step by calculating context and precision. And then evaluating faithfulness during generation with LM as a judge. Really, LM as a judge seems to be the most popular thing right now in production. There's some other metrics that you might want to choose as well, but a lot of people are using some form of LM as a judge, especially in really complex things with LM generation, to look at the results here. And then there's like a way of you can calculate faithfulness. Actually, we can pull up the Ragus docs if we have a second still, but they have faithfulness implemented in there. But you can basically, they have a thing, if I remember correctly, in Ragus, which is like really cool subprompts where it'll basically take in the chunks, like from a wiki, and it re-augments the data in there. So anytime it says references, like it says he, it'll like change it to George Washington, whatever that chunk is actually referencing there. And then it looks to see what gets represented in the final generation and what was actually pulled in through all the chunks. So there's a really cool way of kind of evaluating that. And again, Ragus, I'll share the link again. They have some really cool stuff built around it, which we had used like a month ago or something. I recommend taking a look at if that's like a topic you want to dive deeper in. Oh, let me see real quick too.
I got to go, Sage. Nice chatting here.
Oh yeah, thank you for coming up again, Kevin. Always great to see you.
Likewise.
And I got to end the stream here soon myself as well, but I was going to see real quick inside here. They have a really good breakdown of, yeah, so if you go to available metrics, I'll share the exact links here in a second too. And then this started for retrieval augmented generation evaluation. They have other stuff now in here too. Ragus has kind of grown quite a bit, but if you go to faithfulness, for example, and then this is the breakdown of how they implement it in here. So again, this is not from the book here, but pretty much the exact same thing. The faithfulness metric measures how factually consistent a response is with the retrieved context. It ranges from 0 to 1, with higher scores indicating better consistency. And it's faithful if all its claims can be supported by the retrieved context. So if there isn't like anything made up that's in there, which sometimes it happens too, and sometimes that can be okay. Like if your LM has knowledge about the event that you're asking about, and it actually could be correct, but it's not going to count as faithful if it wasn't inside of the RAG portion. So if you are trying to make every answer grounded, this can be interesting too, to like, you need that information in RAG if that's what you're trying to do. So number of claims in the response supported by the retrieved context, total number of claims in the response. So remember when I was testing this, I don't think I have the example still around. I can look real quick, but I might have deleted it. It was kind of interesting to see. Oh, I'm not connected right now. It's kind of interesting to see, like, you'd get some historical context on something, and then the LM sometimes would say like, that was a bad thing, or it would have some sort of like description about the event even that wasn't in the RAG context. Like it was saying that it was a smear campaign or something about whatever historical figure you were talking about. And it wouldn't count as faithfulness because that part wasn't in the RAG, like whatever kind of thing that was saying the event was, yeah. It was interesting. So really cool metric, I think, if you're doing, depends on what you're doing, but this can be really, really useful if you want to have like more stringent grounding from RAG in your applications. And then like I was talking about 11, just goes through how to kind of build an app that you can actually interact with using something like Streamlit, and you get a RAG app deployed, which is fun. And that was the book. Hopefully, people thought it was interesting. It was a fun. I had a fun read, like I was saying, kind of a lighter read than some of the other books this year. If you thought this sounded interesting, go check out the book on O'Reilly. It should have the links to buy it if you wanted to, as well if you didn't already. Also, the O'Reilly platform you can read on there. If you're in Seattle and a lot of other places, you actually get free access to the O'Reilly platform with a library card. So I have some friends or some people I know that are in the book club, and they usually read through that. So you can check it out if you're not in Seattle. See if your library or university or even work sometimes has access to the O'Reilly platform. And they have more than the O'Reilly books. They have most of the Manny books and Pact and stuff too. So pretty much almost, not everyone, but almost every book that we've read in the book club, you can read on there. And I'll open this up. What should we read next? What should be October? What should be November? What should be December? That'll round up the year. There's a really good one, or a really cool sounding one. I haven't read it, so I don't know if it's good. But this eval for AI engineer is not out yet. I think it's supposed to come out October. So I'm hoping that maybe we can do this one for November or December at least. And there's a whole bunch of other books coming out all the time that sound interesting. There's a whole book on Agentic RAG coming out. I haven't checked recently. I don't think it's released yet, but I could go look. So there's just a lot of interesting topics coming out. AI agents with MCP. People love doing MCP stuff right now too. It's also pretty interesting. But if you have any specific book recommendations for what we should do next, or again, any topics, and we can try to find a book on that topic. Sometimes it's a while before a book comes out, like this eval one. There hasn't really been a good book on evals yet. So I'm excited. This is going to be hopefully a really good one. World models is one people keep asking for. There isn't really a book on world models that I know of anyway. But in the AI Build and Learn, actually, we are going to be doing some world model stuff in like next month, actually, which is, I think, will be interesting. It's like we can run whatever current state-of-the-art open source world models are and see how they work, I think is what we're going to do. So if you're interested in that, I don't think I've posted them yet. Let me just get the calendar link again if you don't already have it. And that's the best way to stay up to date is here on Meetup. Or again, you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I usually post about everything there as well. Yeah, evals and world models, like I was saying, I don't think there's a book on world models yet. But if you have one, let me know. But evals, that one will be coming out, I think. I'm excited for that one. I think it'll be really interesting. So a lot of people are very interested in evals right now, which makes sense. I haven't worked on it recently, but I'm also trying to set aside some time at work to work on hopefully a cool eval project that I've been fiddling with, but I haven't polished it enough to get released yet. Any other comments or questions or, again, book recommendations before I wrap up the stream? Again, if you're in Seattle and I think there's still room, hosting that event tonight, I'll share that one more time. I know not everyone here is in Seattle, but with Qdrant. So again, perfect. If you're talking about RAG and you want to talk to them about vector databases, they're a cool company to do that with. Oh yeah, the AI interface one. I have to look at that because designing AI interfaces, but I don't know if I haven't read this yet. So I don't know if this is generative AI yet, or if this is like interfaces for something else. It says design principles for creative and autonomous AI. So I'm not 100% sure what that is. We can go take a look at the description. It's also an early release, so I'm not sure when it's coming out. So I don't like to actually post them until they're out because they do get delayed sometimes. Like they'll say they're going to come out in October, but then they don't end up coming out until January. And I want to do a fully released title. So I won't put them up until I feel pretty confident. Sometimes if you see like an Amazon shipping date on the physical book too, that can be good enough. But even that slips sometimes. So, all right. Well, if you do have any recommendations later for the next ones, again, you can also recommend them either to me on LinkedIn or in Slack. With that, I'm going to wrap up the stream. Thank you everyone for coming and talking in the chat. It was really fun. The next book is Build a Reasoning Model from Scratch. I'm very excited about this one. We read the first book that is building a large language model from scratch by Sebastian Raschke. I think I actually read one before that too, but that was the first one I read of his. We read that a little over a year ago. So just the December of not last year, but the year before. Really good book. So I'm really excited for this one. It's kind of like a sequel to it in my head. And it's going to be building reasoning models from scratch. So all the cool new stuff that came out from like DeepSeek, doing GRPO. It's going to implement that stuff, I believe, from just looking at the chapter titles. I haven't read the book yet, but I believe like from scratch. So I think it'll be really interesting. That's next month. I'm very excited for that. And then again, the date might change for this one a little bit, but vision language models, I'm also very excited for. So I will talk to you all later.